All right, Brandon, thank you for coming onto the podcast. We tried it a little bit earlier in the year when we were up in the middle part of the state, but your name has rapidly grown, throughout your career with all your wins and world records with Kat. Your Instagram site. It's May 20th. The worms are going off. I can't imagine how tired you are. This time of year in a guide's life in the Lower Keys, it's really busy.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me on here. I mean, it's just an honor. All the names and everything you have, all the people that I've grown up, just idolizing my whole life. So it's really special. But yeah, it's definitely been a grind this season. Thankfully, the Tarpon has started to show up really well. But I had 3.5 weeks straight without a single day off. Had one day off and then just did another week straight. And when the worm hatch happens, you're now fishing, 14, 16-hour days. So it adds up.
How do you balance your family life with your career? Because you have a wife and two kids, 8-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Yep. So, actually, I didn't know how to do it. And when it first started guiding, and like my daughter, unfortunately, her toddler years are just a blur to me, because I grew up with the mentality back before the fall really was good for fishing, that you just ran every day you could during tarpon season. That was your chance to make your money. Basically, starting in March, if you had a charter, you ran every single day you could, because come September, October, you might only get one trip every 2 weeks. So I used to do 150, 160 days straight, maybe a couple weather days here and there.
That's crazy.
Just did whatever I could just to make ends meet and keep a roof over our head because it's so expensive.
How old were you at that time when you were fishing that hard?
21, and I just burned the candle at both ends. I used to guide, 7 days a week. I worked the fly shop 5 nights a week. I'd get in from guiding, and then I'd go straight to the fly shop, saltwater angler at 4:30, work there till 8:30. And then a lot of times I'd go to the gym after that too.
Wow. You're a workaholic.
Yeah. And I just, at the time I didn't really realize what I was doing. I was just go, and just trying to improve myself the most that I could in all aspects of my life. And COVID happened. And all of a sudden I now have 2-3 months off without fishing, and getting to be home with my kids and my wife and family and everything. I just realized how much I had missed and how precious all that time was.
Right.
And when we lost Travis Holman, that was just kind of a wake up call for me. Like, wow, like here's a guy that I considered young and decently healthy, and just gone in the blink of an eye. So it just kind of was a wake up call for me. Like, man, like what am I doing? I could die next year, and when I look back, I don't want to be like, oh man, I'm really happy that I took that extra 3 trips or whatever it was. So I then said, okay, I'm no longer working Saturdays. Every Saturday is going to be for my family, no matter what.
And obviously this is a Saturday.
Yep. Yeah. And even that wasn't enough. Once I started doing Saturdays off, because after you're guiding all week, and, especially as the kids start to get older, there's a big age gap there. One's doing one sport, one wants to do another. So it just still wasn't enough. So, I talked about it with my wife and just our quality of life. I decided to take a little bit of a pay cut and just not work weekends at all. That way I have one day to spend with my daughter and do whatever she wants. And then the other day I do with my son. I mean, obviously, like I don't isolate them. Like,
right.
We've gone on the boat to go to the beach with my daughter on Saturday. My son's coming with us. If my son's obsessed with fishing, even though he's only 2.5, he just likes to go on the boat and see the fish. My daughter comes with us on that. And that was the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, I was going to say probably on the weekends too. You're still on your boat.
Right, yeah, I'm out every day. Yeah, because my wife's a fishaholic too. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is she a fly fisherman?
She's getting into it now. When we first met, she wasn't. But yeah, she's definitely getting into fly fishing now, and she was getting pretty good. And once our son was born, obviously she didn't get to go as much, didn't get to practice. But yeah, man, it's been a hell of a ride with the kids and trying to figure it all out. And that's just like fishing. You're trying to figure out different strategies, what works, what doesn't work. It's been a lot of fun.
And you're 4th generation conch.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean to be a conch?
So a conch is somebody that's born in Key West in the Lower Keys. And the whole reason the conch thing kind of came about, it was a Bahamian tradition. When a Bahamian baby was born, how everybody would let them know they'd either put a conch out on the front porch or on a stick, and that was to signify a new child being born in the household.
Oh, that's
And
so cool.
like my family originally came over from the Bahamas. So like a lot of those older Key West families, what they were British loyalists that during the American Revolution fled from the United States, went to the Bahamas, had a few generations there, and then came from the Bahamas to Key West. I could be wrong on the exact date. My brother did the Ancestry.com thing, and we were able to trace it back that our family got here in like 1867.
Oh my God.
Wow. Amazing. Well, a lot of people know of Key West as the Conch Republic.
Yep.
So how does that term come into play with Key West and the Conch?
So, the story's kind of fuzzy to me. They taught us when I was in elementary school, and I don't really remember it, but it was more of a publicity stunt than anything else. I can't remember which president it was or even what year it was, but there were some issues going on with us getting the stuff that we needed down here. And they basically, it was something to do with the roads or the highway or something like that, the bridges. And they basically declared that we separated ourselves from the Union, made us our own country, and it only lasted I think like 4 hours. But like the National Guard came, like they put tanks up like at the road block and stuff at the entrance to Homestead. So I mean, it was like, that was kind of like, or maybe it was just like one of the things here, but that was the Conch Republic where we seceded from the United States and became our own country for a little thing. And it was purely just to get national attention to the issue that was going on at the time.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And your father was an offshore fisherman. What did your grandparents do? Were they charter captains or?
So my grandfather on my father's side was actually a submariner in the Navy down here, and that was how he met my mom, my grandmother, my father's mom. And on my mother's side, my grandfather was kind of a man that did a little bit of everything. He was a principal at a school down here. He did commercial fishing. He owned a commercial fish market, and that was how my mom and dad met. Was my dad was selling fish to the fish market and met my mom that way.
Gotcha.
The fishing history on that side actually goes on my father's side. So there's a man named Willie Wickers, which was my dad's uncle, great uncle or uncle, but he actually brought the first marlin, charter boat caught marlin to in 1945 in Key West. They made a big deal of it at the time. That was the Queen of Key West came down, in a bikini. They took a bunch of pictures of him and everything like that. Because Hemingway used to obviously catch marlin and stuff like that, but it was the private boat. I guess the charter boats just couldn't keep them on, would always lose them, but it was like a 400 and something pound marlin.
Wow.
And then so he kind of got the whole family started. I think he started it was 1945, and that marlin might have been in the 60s. But then both of my uncles, my dad's brothers, were guides, offshore deep sea guides, and I think there was four or five cousins that were underneath Willie Wickers that started. So that whole charter boat row was just like our family.
Wow.
At the beginning. So
who broke the mold to become flats fishermen? You guys?
It was actually my father.
So I know your dad. Yeah, because the movie that's out on YouTube about your family.
I think it's like a Costa film.
It's fascinating. It's beautifully done.
Yeah.
But he tells the story, or you tell the story, where your family decides to go to, I think, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. You're leaving the Keys, and you guys are watching Jose Waihebi, and your dad says, you want to go home.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, tell us about that story.
Yeah, so, originally the whole reason we left was, the amount of life that was down here back in the 70s and 80s. My dad first started doing it, even the early 90s. The fishing was incredible. Catching blue marlin, white marlin, yellowfin tunas. It was just like all the other exotic places you hear in the world. Like, it was just one of the best locations to do it. And we used to have commercial longliners down here back then, and they killed everything. And also back then, like, I'll never forget when I was a kid, my father telling me that everything died. When you caught it, they thought it was an endless resource. They didn't have the science, they didn't have the knowledge to know that, the ocean just seemed vast, so vast that you couldn't possibly diminish the stocks.
Permit, barracuda, sharks,
everything died. If you go watch that 70s, the
Tarpon
old Tarpon film, they're
yeah.
killing. And it wasn't because they were like, they just thought that it was just an endless supply, like
Sure.
like insects, and My dad tells me stories like they used to throw blackfin tunas in the dumpster. People wouldn't eat them because they had so many yellowfin around that you couldn't sell them to the fish markets. Like it just didn't matter. And, so he had that his whole guide career. And then all of a sudden, starting in the early 2000s, it all had been so diminished that, it was down to like, the charter boats would catch a couple marlin a year. And it got to the point where all these beautiful deep sea boats that were catching giant mahi, 60, 70 pound mahi, 180 pound yellowfin tunas, 400 pound marlin, were now having to go to the reef and catch barracudas trolling just to keep
Make
the business
a day.
going. Yeah. And, now you see those trolling boats out there and they're all just anchored up on the reef trying to catch yellowtails.
Right.
And it just broke his heart. He just couldn't take it anymore.
Even today, I see a lot of the light tackle guys at the marinas. They come in with a pile of fish. It's like the anglers that charter the boat cannot eat that much fish.
Absolutely.
So do they sell the other fish to the markets? What do they must.
Some of them do. I think some of them do sell it, and there's a lot of them that just they pack it and freeze it. That's basically how they get paid. And like that was like one of the reasons that they killed so much back then was back before social media, internet. That was how you got booked. Like I'll never forget when I was every day after school with my dad, he'd come pick me up. The mate would be at the boat. We'd go back to the boat, and right in front of the boat, there would be that, 2x4s with all the dolphin, mahi, tuna, anything was on those big nails stuck to the wall so that when people drove by, whoever had the most hanging up,
they wanted to fish.
They wanted to fish with that guy.
But that goes all the way up and down the coast.
Right.
Isla Mirada, the same thing. All those old time guys up there.
That was the old Instagram.
Yep, exactly.
For the most part.
Especially, like, I don't know where it was, where all the tarpon used to be hung up too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I always think it's kind of funny that a lot of the old timers talk about how social media ruins fishing. But they used to hang and kill everything they caught. I mean, it's all learning processes, there's good and evil and everything. But
if it ultimately gets you more trips and you're not causing harm, it's like,
I think as a guide, as a young guide, you almost have to prove yourself on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean,
and word of mouth. How else do you get your name out there?
Well, and that's the whole reason that I honestly took the big plunge into Instagram when I first started doing it was, I was a young guide. I started guiding literally a week out of high school. I went and got my first guide skiff. And the only way that I could get charters was through the concierge and at different hotels and stuff like that.
And then they take a big commission.
30%.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, and a lot of times the concierge trips, they're not people who are diehard fishermen. They're just people who are down here like, oh, hey, what can we do? Like, oh, let's do this flats charter, and at the time, you're charging $400 and they take 30% of that. That's a lot of money, and all they're doing is picking up the phone. That's what used to kill me, was thinking that somebody just dialed my phone number, called me and said, hey, are you open in 3 days? And I'd say, yeah, I'm open. Okay, boom. And then right there, they get 30% of my living when I'm out pushing a 1,400 pound skiff around with a stick.
Right.
And it just killed me. And, I had social media and, I was looking at the time, I was really into spearfishing. So like when I would go places, I would look up spearfishing and, through the hashtags and stuff like that. And that's how I found guides and other relevant things that I wanted to do was through social media. Cause I didn't know about, I didn't do TripAdvisor or stuff like that.
Right.
And so I just kind of got the idea where, people started messaging me when I would post photos and stuff like that. And I was like, man, like this is free advertising. Like if I can start getting,
sure,
posting on here, because like at the time nobody was really catching bonefish off of Key West either, and I had just kind of tapped into it really well. And when we would do the tournaments, people were just pretty astonished, and I was astonished that we were finding them the way we were. And because I remember when I worked in the fly shop in high school, if somebody called Key West and said, hey, I want to go bone fishing, I'd say, man, don't come down here. Go to Isla Mirada. Go to Key Biscayne. Like, you're wasting your money. Don't come to Key West. And so all of a sudden, when the fish started showing back up, it was our chance to kind of, hopefully use that and kind of help me put me on the map.
Right.
So I want to go back before you guys moved to North Carolina. You said in that film or an article I read that you knew you wanted to become a guide ever since a really young age.
Yeah, I have the exact memory. I'll never forget. I was 4 years old. We were heading south out of, and my dad is my hero. always has been my entire life. And I can remember being up on the flying bridge with him, and I just love driving boats, like any kid, you know, cars, whatever. And I never forget like looking at it, and I wanted to do it on my own. And because he kept, you know, would adjust the wheel and stuff like that. And he'd be like, all right, you see the compass? Put it on 180 south, follow that line. And, you know, when we go to change it, I'll tell you. And I'll never forget standing there holding the wheel, and I was standing on the chair in his lap, holding it, just looking out. And I just remembered, like, I just had the greatest feeling of just control and just freedom that I've ever had in my life to this day. And I just got goosebumps just talking about it. And I just remember, like, this is what I want to do. And I mean, I remember my entire life all the way up, my last serious girlfriend I had in high school. I'll never forget, we were talking about colleges and stuff, and I had a swimming scholarship and I turned it down. And she was like, that's what you want to do? Like, you don't want anything more for yourself in life? And I was like, no, this is all I've ever known. It's all I've ever wanted.
Were your dreams crushed when you made that move to the Carolinas?
No, I mean, I was so young then.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was in 2003. So I was 10 years old. You know, at the time, all I had ever known was water. You know, we had a canal. I was on the boat every day with my dad, everything. And our summer vacations would be to go up to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, you know, bounce around the mountains in North Carolina and stuff like that in Tennessee. And I was just in awe of the woods. I had never seen anything like it in my life. You know, we have Australian pines down here, and that's it. It's all concrete and water and mangroves. So all of a sudden I'm in these mountains and there's no people around, and just the cool air and just the Smoky Mountains, just as the majesticness of it just captivated me. And so that's what my dad had envisioned too. We thought we were going to be there.
What was he going to do up there work-wise?
So my mother's brother-in-law owned a chain of grocery stores. And we originally had moved up there with the intent that he was going to help open up a new store, become a manager, and it was going to be in Boone. So we thought we were going to be in the mountains.
Oh man, he's going to go from an offshore captain to opening a grocery store.
Right. Well, you know, we were thinking more just like the afternoon stuff, because my dad was one of those guys that work was just to allow us to survive.
Right.
Right. And then like that, every afternoon we were doing something together as father, son, family, my brother. And so that was like, okay, this is going to unlock. We'll be able to go hiking every day. We'll be able to go. And we used to watch hunting videos like crazy when we were growing up, because we never got to hunt. And so that was like, we're going to start hunting whitetail. We're going to start all this. And that was our idea behind it. And then next thing you know, we end up in Hickory, North Carolina in suburbia, and a different grocery store. He ended up being produce manager. And he just absolutely hated it. Here's this man that since he was 19 years old has been his own boss, had the freedom to do whatever he want. Every decision he made throughout the day was his. To now working under somebody, and
yeah, I can see that going bad
went
fast.
Nuts. Yeah.
What was the fishing poor? Is that why initially he wanted to leave Key West?
That's exactly it. It just ripped his soul out that he went from, you know, having one of the best fisheries in the world to scraping by just to make a half day.
Right.
You know, and that just destroyed him. You know, and at the time, if you look back at 2003, conservation wasn't around like it is now. So like there was no hope. You know, it just looked like it was going to keep declining until there was no fish left in the ocean. And I think he just had it. And yeah, I'll never forget, we were watching, that was when, you know, Flip Pallid, Jose, that was our Saturdays, like saltwater Saturdays on ESPN. And, you know, obviously he knew Jose and we knew Jose. And our big thing that we were really into was doing the live baiting sailfish. And I'll never forget sitting there in the living room, we were watching Jose catch sailfish, and I can still remember the video, the image in my head, everything. And Jose was cast netting bait at Western Dry Rocks, and they went out and started catching sailfish, and we were sitting there, and we're just like, God, like, you know, that used to be our lives. And my dad just looked over at my brother and me and said, "You guys want to go home?" And we were like, "Really?" We're like, "Yeah." So, I mean, you know, I was 10 years old, so I can't really remember the timeline perfectly, but it felt like within a week we moved back here. We didn't even sell our house. We were just so ready to get out of there that I think our school year had just ended. It was in like May or something like that. We were up there because we went up there in January. So we were only there for like 4 months. Just couldn't handle it. And we just shot straight back here and never looked back. Sold our house eventually, you know, and just we rented down here for a while and just kind of, you know, and that's really, I think, what got me into that mindset of just work. Because, you know, fishing guides don't make a lot of money. And that was, right before the 2008 financial crisis, houses down here that used to be 400,000 were now up to 800,000. So, my dad was just, parents both were just doing everything they could just to survive. And so that was just what I was used to seeing.
Mm-hmm. Are you naturally a workaholic, or are you just a passionate guy that loves to fish? Or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. I'm one of those people that I don't like to half-ass anything that I care about. And I'm a really big believer that work ethic is everything. No matter what you do in life, if you're going to do it right. And so I think that's and I got that from my dad. I remember being a little boy, 3-4 years old, and he would take me to school in the mornings, but before his charter, we were at the gym at 5:30 in the morning, and I was there just hanging out with him, watching him lift, and because he was going to get his exercise in before he went fishing for the day. And that was just part of the process. You do what's necessary, take care of your body to make sure that you're able to perform. And that's always just kind of been ingrained in me,
Are you working out in the mornings before you fish?
No, I can't focus. I've tried doing it in the mornings, and I'm just too tired and too groggy. I always go after my charters, which, it sounds crazy. You think you'd be exhausted, but thank God for caffeine. Helps me really get through. And I've gotten my diet pretty dialed in that I can spike my carbs throughout the day to give me more energy. And it's pretty intense, but yeah, I normally work out in the afternoons. I just can focus better that way.
If you take a look at all the top captains, more so than the anglers, Rob Fordyce, Dustin Huff, Ian Slater, Nathaniel a lot, yourself. I don't know who else, but really,
it's like a common trend.
It's a commonality that you guys are all, body conscious, success driven.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it in any sport, let's just take, since we're talking about fly fishing, we're all spending, these skiffs now can run over $100,000. We're using the best technology in fly rods, the best technology in drags and reels, best technology in fly lines. These are all tools that we're using to improve our game, right? What is the one tool that no matter what, we cannot change? It's our bodies. If I want to push into the wind, that's why like these guys that don't care, I just don't understand. To me, that is my body is my most important tool. Mm-hmm. It is the one thing that no matter what other tool I use, I have to use my body in order to use that tool. So if I can make myself stronger, more endurance, more efficient, all of it, I'm going to be a better guide.
Let me ask you, are you conscious about that as a tool, your body being a tool, or is that just more of a lifestyle? That's who you are.
I think that's just who I am, because that's just like, and I'm the same way with food. Like, it sounds crazy, but like my food's weighed out in grams every day.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So what do your boat lunches look like?
It's a lot of food. I eat 6 meals a day.
Six meals?
6 meals a day. Yeah. And so like I had a trainer who like, he's really into like the professional bodybuilding and everything like that. And obviously I'm not into that. I'm just into efficiency. And, my wife, that's actually how we met, was in the gym. She's the exact same way. Mm-hmm. And, through nutrition, because, as another analogy, it's fuel. I just look food purely as fuel. If you go to run your skiff and you put in bad fuel with water in it, you're going to get a bad performance out of your motor. Well, if I put in bad food into my body, I'm not going to feel as good. Mm-hmm. So I'm putting in the right octane to make me perform at the best level that I can. And, through these people at the gym and stuff like that, and my friends and nutritionists, I've learned that, instead of having all these caffeinated drinks and all this other stuff, our bodies are naturally designed to take food. That is our fuel. And so through carbs, protein, fats, you can time it at different days, time of the day, to spike your insulin and, the carbs, and to flush it all out at night, what's going to absorb more water, what's not. So you can really dial in a system for what works best for your body.
Maybe if you weren't eating so many Cape Cod chips.
No, you're the one who buys the Cape Cods and fish dip every night. Dip in the fish dip with the Cape Cod.
Hey, we caught 3 yesterday.
Yeah, we did. We caught 3 yesterday, but you ate 2 bowls of fish dip and 3 bags of Cape Cods. You did, not me.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I definitely cheat sometimes. I'll eat a whole pizza sometimes at night or something like that.
When you're really hungry, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
so on the boat, you have like 3 Tupperwares?
4. Normally. 4 Tupperwares and a bag of apples. It's like what? So like,
and it's like
you eat all the apples.
It's like a chicken breast and rice.
Yeah. So like right now, like my current thing is it's 170 grams of for the first meal is 170 grams of chicken, 225 grams of potatoes, 60 grams of broccoli, and then an apple with that one. That's normally at 10 o'clock, and then at like 12 to 12:30, I eat a whole salad. Another 225 grams of potatoes, 170 grams of chicken. And then the next meal after that is the same as the first one. So that's the 4 containers right there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's a lot. But,
well, I think that, I think you would probably be a real fat man if you didn't work out so hard because you're burning a lot of calories when you're working out.
Well, and also, as pushing. Just pulling.
Yeah.
If I'm doing my job properly, I'm pushing around 1,400 pounds plus my clients with a stick into the wind and current. And that's honestly what really made me get into the weightlifting side of it, and the exercise in the gym was I don't mind talking about the spot because the jet skis have ruined it, but Seaplane Basin. When I first started guiding, Seaplane Basin was one of the best tarpon spots, and it has a lot of really soft grass bottom in it. And there was one day in there that there was probably like 7 or 8 skiffs, and it was blowing like 25 to 28 out of the east real hard. And we were having a little mini tournament between like 4 boats, and all 4 boats were in there. And I'll never forget like pushing. I was just dying, pushing into it. And I slowly watched the out of shape guides start dropping like flies. They couldn't hold into the wind anymore, and they couldn't go after the way the fish were moving. They'd fall out and leave. And that just happened to be at that time, that's where all the fish were. And I started watching them drop out one after another. And I was the last one left. And I was kind of like, whoa, okay. So like this has something to it. Like, because I'm able to keep going, that it made life easier for me.
Yeah. You said you were having a little mini tournament within 4 boats. What was that?
Oh, I mean, it was just like, it used to be called the trips.
Oh,
yeah. It was just.
With Steve?
Yeah. It was. Yeah. I was just one of those boats at the time, that we were doing that. It was just kind of a fun little thing between like 4 or 5 buddies that.
I didn't know if you and your buddies or your brother competed with each other in a day on the water. I'll bet you $100 I catch more fish than you today.
No, man, there's so much natural competition and pressure on us through clients, stuff like that. And like, me and my brother really try to help each other out a lot, and
do you talk every day? What are you seeing?
During tarpon season, we do.
Yeah.
Permit and stuff. We're pretty hush-hush about, just because it's just different fishery.
It's so hard.
Well, and the thing is that like, if the fish are flowing really hard on the south side somewhere, if I call him or he calls me and say, dude, they're flowing hard, he can come in a quarter mile behind me, or I can come in a quarter mile behind him, and it's not affecting his fishing, but now I'm on fish. Right. Those fish are migrating. We're never going to see those fish again.
Let's go back to, when you were growing up with your brother, Jared. What do you remember the first year of having your own skiff? What were you seeing out there in the ocean? Because that was 20 years ago. And when did you get your first skiff? 2011. So it was 12 years. Well, I mean, me and my brother had a skiff when I think he was 14 and I was 10. But we weren't ocean fishing back then. We were just kind of messing around. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were messing around the backcountry. But so around 15 years ago.
Yeah, like when we really started was, the main thing that I remember is this amount of tarpon schools. Like fish used to pour through Northwest Channel in acres. And you'd have all the light tackle boats, and that would be in January. Just giant herds nonstop, and that would start the tarpon season. And the schools were just massive everywhere. And those schools don't come there anymore. They don't even, you get like small strings that'll come, but like I'm talking about biomasses.
Right.
That doesn't exist. Spots like Seaplane Basin, where there used to be thousands of fish, you might have one good day there a year now.
Yeah.
And that's
I remember, I've told Nikki this, I remember going in there and turning my key off and never moving.
Yeah.
And jump 18 and catch 9 or 10 fish.
Even permit used to be like that. Like I remember like when I caught my first permit, on the Gulf edges, You know, I remember my dad's first flats boat was like a hybrid bay boat. It was like an old 19-foot Wellcraft bay boat that had been cut basically in half at the gunnel and made into a flat skiff. So it was super heavy, hard to pull it. And we would just basically stake off on the edges, and permit would come through in waves like tarpon strings. And that's how I caught all our first permit. We didn't do much pulling. You just held on the edge with a push pole with the white moonlighter,
Right.
fiberglass pole, and they just kept coming. That doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. All those spots that used to just have herds and herds of fish, they're gone.
What is the future of Key West fishing?
You know, it's teeter-tottering.
Yeah, because you're talking about the biomass, and I think a lot of other guys speak about this as well. Dustin, we interviewed Albert Ponzola recently, and they were saying, too, the biomass that you usually see in February out in the Gulf is gone.
Yeah.
You just don't see those numbers. But, two, you're talking about the permit, and people are really wondering what's happening to the permit fishery. This year, in 2023, the fishing has really been poor.
It has been, and I think it's I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to follow this up because they closed Western Dry Rocks thinking that that's where they spawn. We'll close it so the light tackle guys can't kill a bunch of fish out there to the sharks. And in a couple of years, it's going to be great. And they closed that, a year ago? Year and a half ago? And the fish are not coming back.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, what would I be thinking if I were you?
So we're definitely in the process of addressing this. Unfortunately, the Western Dry Rocks closure thing, it is a great thing for us. It's a step, right? But that doesn't stop those light tackle guides from going out there the rest of the year. One of the most devastating moments of the year for me this year was I had a light tackle guide I had heard through another friend he was telling me that they caught, I think it was 27 permit the day before the closure on April 1st at Western Dry Rocks. So, they're messing with those fish anyways. They were already, they went and spawned early this year. So that's part of it, and that same guide I wasn't, because I come from both backgrounds, offshore and inshore. When the whole Western Dry Rocks thing first started, I was a little hesitant because I know how important that spot is to a lot of those offshore guides. Now, me as a conservationist, it was a no-brainer because there's so many different species that spawn there. That's your source. Why not protect it?
Right.
That's just common sense to me. But, a lot of people don't see it that way. And I think that, people just need to realize that, sometimes you need to take a hit, whether it's catching less fish or not. If we want this to be here for our grandkids or even just my kids, we need to do something about it. And I wasn't sure how well the conservation stuff worked until our bone fishery is the perfect example of that. I think it was 15 years ago, Cuba stopped gill netting. And when I was growing up, if we went out and saw 5 bonefish a day, that was a phenomenal day. All the guides chummed like crazy just to get bonefish up. You talked to Steve Huff, they didn't have many bonefish around. Lefty Cray wrote in his book that bonefish didn't exist west of Content Keys. And once they stopped doing that, BTTs kind of realized that when those fish go out and spawn off the tip of Cuba, the larva cycle, a lot of larvae will end up here, Isla Morada, and so far up.
And how long did that take for you to see results down in the Lower Keys?
I want to say it was 5, so it might have been longer than 15 years. It was about 5 to 6 years after they stopped doing that we started seeing fish.
That was one of the great things BTT has done.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
So is that kind of the thought process with Western Dry Rocks? You're not going to see results. You're not going to see more permit until 5 or 6 years from now?
Well, absolutely. I mean, because the whole thing is that these fish, people I don't know the age on permit, but for a bonefish example, a 10-pound bonefish is 25 years old.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow.
So to go and do a permit, you're not going to they're going to go spawn and then a year later you have a 10-pound fish swimming around. Mm-hmm. You get the larva cycle and then they're going to be little juveniles hidden in places. And that's another part is where they're juveniles, there's people are swimming at the beaches and stuff like that. They're catching them in cast nets and all that. But there's also just a huge part of their cycle that we just don't know about. We see a lot of 10-pound fish. I've probably never in my life ever down here have I ever seen a permit that was this big.
They live in Belize.
Right, but there's no way that they're migrating that far, right?
Right.
They got to be somewhere.
Right.
And I've seen them this big on the flats, and I see them this big. Where are these guys at? You know, and there's all different rumors about them going up with pompano schools more up and towards Florida, because these fish migrate long ways. You know, we're starting to realize, you know, through tagging how far a fish will travel.
Right.
And so that's kind of just right now what we're trying to do is find out more. And like we're actually doing a little study right now with the BTT thing on like why the fish haven't been around Key West as much. You know, I mean, I'm still seeing some here and there. You know, it's definitely right now is better than last year or you know, the past fall that we had.
Right.
I'm definitely seeing more.
What's a good day of permit fishing?
Man, that's so tough to say. You know, like
it fluctuates that much.
It fluctuates so much day to day. You know, weather patterns and everything like that. And clients, like I would just say like a normal day where I'm not like, okay, that was great and that wasn't sad. I would say it's like 8 to 10 shots before it got tough. 8 to 10 shots, like quality shots is a normal good day. You know, and obviously you have the days where you see 30 shots, you know, and you see other fish that are spooking off.
And if you have a blue crab, you're going to catch one or two.
Oh yeah, catching one on a blue crab is not a problem. Yeah, like if you go down here with a blue crab, we're going to catch one. But that's just a whole different animal.
Right.
You know,
I'm in.
Yeah, it's
it's fun.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
fun. Something about, I mean, in essence, a permit's really not a flats fish. You know, they're a pelagic jack that has an addiction to crabs.
Right.
And that's why they like the channels and stuff like that. And that's one of what I think is a big issue. So we used to see these fish floating in channels everywhere. I'm sure you guys have seen it too. All the tarpon spots for the last 7-8 months, they're gone. And what I think it is traffic. So these fish that used to be in the channels, there's so many bay boat operations off of Key West now that all the guys who used to own a single bay boat now own 6 bay boats, and they're having hired captains, you know, $100, $150 a day, people who don't know what they're doing, running those boats for them. And they're going in those channels to catch, you know, their 10-inch mangroves, and they're doing 3 trips a day. Running
all
over those fish. And so that was, you know, the whole thing of permit is that's their safety net. And like when I used to scout for a tournament, I would look around for those big schools. And when I would see that big school, I'd be like, okay, because that's when they're going to break off in 1s and 2s or small groups and go feed. But that's their central hub.
Right.
And that doesn't exist anymore. I can't tell you the last time I saw a floating school off of Key West.
Can you fly fish for those floating schools in those channels?
You can. I like to leave them alone just because of that. I think that's their home and safety. You know, and they're really hard to feed on fly. There's a couple of techniques that I'm not going to share because I don't want people to do that. I want those fish to stay relaxed. But it's possible. But I think a lot of people didn't do a lot of the guides because it's so hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really hard to catch one of those permit.
But what's the difference? What's the difference between that and dredging a channel for a tarpon?
I don't know. I don't know if there is much of a difference. You know, I don't know enough about the tarpon's patterns. If that's what they're doing to relax, or if that's just kind of a casual feeding ground for them. You know, I just noticed that, like for the permit in particular, that is their safety. That's where they're going to hang out, to relax the school, to gather back up, whether it's going to be to move, because those things shift. Like that's like all the good permit guides. If you talk to them, like there'll be one section of like an area, you know, say a 2-mile square area or 1 mile. That's where the biomass of permit are for that season. That's where everybody's doing the best. Then it might not be good for 4 more years. Those fish shift around. I don't know if that's purely pressure based. And so through BTT, that's actually one of the things that we're doing right now is we just got them. We're doing fin clips and an anal swab. Mm-hmm. And so there's 3 different theories. One is that something is wrong with our food source. You know, we kind of had a meeting of the minds with some of these guys, and we're talking about it. And it could either be that our water quality down here after Hurricane Ian and all that, like I told you about, we had the red tide in February and 87-degree water, which I've never seen before in my life. Something's wrong with our food source. So the fish are going somewhere else to find it. Because we're talking about the spawning aggregations, BTT's been staying on top of it. The spawning aggregation has not changed. We haven't lost fish. A bunch of fish haven't died. It hasn't gotten bigger, or I know of, you know, obviously plus or minus a little bit, but nothing significant enough to signify why this is happening. So it's either our food source, or they found a food source somewhere else that is more nutrient rich. So instead of being here, they're going there, or it's pressure. Our food source is completely fine, and there's so many guides and so much pressure on them that they're not doing their normal program. If you have your favorite restaurant you go to and you walk down the same alley and you get jumped every time you go to that, you're either going to change restaurants or find a different route. So that's kind of the process.
It's a great analogy for sure.
Yeah. So through the fin clips and those anal swabs, we're able to see what their longer diet was. And through the anal swab, you can see their immediate recent diet, right? So we'll hopefully be able to tell you, okay, this fish has changed from being a crab, rock shrimp, whatever, to, clams or, whatever the case might be. Permit eat a lot of really weird stuff. You hear all these stories of people catch them all kinds of crazy things. I know I've caught them on. That's the thing about permit. That's what fascinates me is just
sea urchins.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff, man.
Right.
I've caught, biggest permit I've ever caught in my life was like 36 pounds. And I thought he had blackheads all over his mouth, like how we have pimples and blackheads. I was like, what is that? And ran my finger over it, and one of them was sticking out a little bit. And I was like, what? I pinched it real hard and I pulled it out, and it was a sea urchin spine,
Yes.
like that big. And I was like, I'm just imagining this massive sea urchin
With spike, like a porcupine.
right? Like
Yes.
what made that parent be like, yeah, I'm gonna do that? Like,
Wild.
it's crazy.
I know.
I've caught them on one of the craziest ones I ever caught was when I first started guiding. I was doing a photo shoot for Columbia Sportswear, and they wanted to catch a tarpon, and it was like the middle of December, and I was like, ugh, it's cold. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I'll try. And I was drifting in a channel with a live pinfish that was 6 inches long on a 4-0 circle hook with 50-pound leader. Rod goes down, fight it didn't jump. I'm like, oh, it's a big female. Like a 25-pound permit. Ate a live pinfish, and the circle hook was perfect right in the corner of his mouth.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You'd never think they'd eat it.
No, and I've
bait.
heard of guides catching them on, what a Shimano waxwing is?
Mm-mm.
Craziest looking plug. It's like this big. It's got a fin on top and bottom with 2 giant J hooks off the back. And he caught him on that. I mean, I've heard people catching them on Cuda tubes during the Cuda Bowl this year. I had 3 or 4 chase.
They caught them on tube lures.
I've heard people, yep.
We thought they were smart.
Well,
They are a member of the Jack family.
That's what I was going to say. One of my favorite things to tell clients is sometimes, certain areas bring the jack out in them.
Right. Get it close.
Is that
and strip it
how
fast.
you fish for permit with your clients? Stripping fast?
It's completely different spot to spot, time of
Is it?
year.
What the fish is doing.
Current. Reading the fishes. Exactly, and like even client to client basis, because
Sure.
there's some people that, certain flies, you have to let it drop and sink, and they cannot help themselves. They have to strip, and like you see that fish coming over to it, even though that's what you've been catching them on. As soon as that fish is going down, they do big long strip to try to entice it, and it just scares the bejesus out of the fish. So I think that's just kind of more of a guide call, feeling them out and reading it. I think they eat all kinds of stuff, and it's just more about reading the fish and trying to figure it out at that time. And that's the beauty of permit, is that it's constantly evolving and changing. Like the hot fly 10 years ago is completely different than the hot fly now. And it's always changing. They're so smart that they adapt. And I remember when I first found out about the strong arm through Nathaniel, first time I ever fished it, I was like, this is the golden ticket.
It was like the toad for tarpon.
It was just mind blowing. I remember like I went from guiding like, maybe 5 permit a year on fly to like 25 to 35, like just
Instantly.
exponential. And then now everybody knows about it, and you don't see a single fly rod in a tournament basically that's not throwing a strong arm, or clients that come down that have never even fished for permit before have like the most beautiful strong arms I've ever seen. And now they're used to it. Now they're not eating that anymore.
And Dave Skoke designed that fly, correct?
Yep. I think it was Dave and Nathaniel.
So Nathaniel told Dave what to tie, and Dave tied it?
I don't think it happened like that. I think it was more of a like combined process together. Like they talked about it. I think it was more Nathaniel. If I just know the way Nathaniel's mind works, it was more of him saying like, hey, this is kind of what I want this to do. This is what I'm imagining.
Right.
And then Dave Skoke is the guy that was like, I know what materials will make that do that.
He's the
Interesting.
artist.
Right. And that's what I love fly tying, But guys like Dave Skoke just blow my mind because like anything that I tie, even if it's something that nobody else has, I'm just taking different stuff that other people have done and manipulating it to my own or changing it up. People who have that kind of creative mindset is astonishing to me.
Right.
Like
a Tim Borsky.
Right.
Yeah. There's eccentric people.
Dude, it's crazy. And like, there's just, I have, Nathaniel's one of those guys that, weigh out his flies in grams, and like, I remember one time tying these, like my first strong arms I started tying, and I would, I didn't have the confidence to throw them. And I went out with Nat and we were fun fishing together, and he like opened my box up. He's like, "Oh, what are these?" I'm like, "Oh, those are mine." And he like wanted to throw it. I'm like, "No, don't do that, please.
They won't work.
They won't work." He's like, "No, it'll work." And he was asking me what yarn I tied it with, and I was like, "Well, what? Like, why does it look bad?" He's like, "Well, no, I want to know what the sink rate's going to be. Like, is it this yarn or is it this yarn? Because this one holds more water than that one does."
That's what he's a brilliant.
It's
he's
unreal.
a scientist.
Yeah, and it's unreal. I mean, honestly, Nathaniel was one of the greatest mentors I've ever had.
Speaking of Nathaniel, I heard you talk about, I forget where, but I heard you talk about one of Nathaniel's greatest catches, or the greatest catch you've ever seen. And he hooked a permit, and the permit was coming at him. And he didn't get a good hook set, so he roll casted.
Yep.
To get the hook going that the weight going that way.
Yeah, because the current, this one spot, the current rips. And, fish came up, ate right on the surface. And as soon as he pricked it, the fish came up on the surface with its dorsal out of the water, tail out, just sprinting full throttle at us. And, normally I'm imagining somebody keeping their rod tip down, stripping fast, trying to keep up with it. Well, as soon as it happened, Nat did one kind of strip, started bringing it back slowly and started lifting his rod, which is like the first immediate, like, no, like keep tension. And he's keeping tension, like water loading it slow. Like he did it slow. Now I realize he did it slow so that it didn't pull the whole fly line out of the water. He just pulled up just enough to get it out of here. And the fish is charging at us. And the whole time I'm screaming, strip, strip, strip. He just listened and goes, boom, and punched it. And the fly line went straight behind the fish, like 15, 20 feet.
And set the hook.
Just line went back behind him. He put his rod tip down, didn't even strip, just pinched it, started reeling, and looked back and just smiled at me. He goes, relax. And I'm like, what? You're the fish. And the fish goes screaming by, goes past the platform. I'm like, what? And the line starts shooting a rooster tail going by me. And I was like, what just happened? He goes, well, I got the line behind the fish. That's going to keep tension on the fly and keep the fly in until he gets to the reel, and I'll be able to bury the hook in better. And I mean,
that's pretty brilliant.
But what blows my mind is that happened in a millisecond.
Yeah, and he held his composure.
There was no time to react. And I was like, oh, have you done that before? He's like, no, but it makes sense. And so that's
he's brilliant. Yeah,
he's one of the best in the world.
That's amazing.
His mind works like that. Like, who would think to do that? So he's outside of the box kind of guy.
Right. I'm always fascinated by people who do things like Nathaniel just did. And you do these things as a guide. What do you see differently than an average guide that's out there, or even a good guide out there when they're out there fishing? Do you think about the night before certain tides where you want to be? How do you think outside the box?
I think everybody's minds work differently, and for me, I just like to be observant. I like to watch. I like to see what's going on, watch the fish patterns. I like to really, this is the first year in my life that I've ever started writing down notes. I've always just kept everything in my head. And
what kind of notes do you write down?
Like I'll write like, okay, I caught a fish on this spot, on this tide, water temperature is this, was moon phase. And honestly, I started doing it for my son. I would love if my daughter wanted to guide, but she just doesn't have the fishy bug in her. She loves a boat, but my son just seems so obsessed with it. And I would just love, you hear all these stories like, through you guys and this stuff. And I'm just fascinated by what it used to be like and everything like that. And like, a lot of these, I get to fish a lot of these clients, been fishing it since the 60s, and we'll get on a spot and they tell me about what it is. And for me, it's just so cool. Like, man, that's fascinating. And like all this stuff. And so I think it would be really cool for me to have this journal of what I'm seeing every day or what it is, so that 20 years from now, my son can look back at it.
Do you ever look at those notes yourself and think, okay, I'm kind of stuck here?
Next year I will. But like I said, just because it's just this year and the seasons have been changing, I haven't. You know what I did do, which is crazy, is from posting on social media. I used to post every day, every single day, no matter what. And Facebook memories, although I don't ever use Facebook anymore, I'll go on there on, like you said, like when things are kind of weird or slow, I'll go on Facebook memories and I'll click on it. There's 10 years worth of photos. And I don't have a very good memory on a lot of things in life, but if I see a single picture or somebody's face, even though I don't know their name, I can tell you where they caught that fish, what the tide was doing, wind direction, water temperature. That's just what my mind remembers. It drives my wife crazy. Tells me to take the garbage out. 3 minutes later, I'll walk out and forget the garbage. I see a guy that I fished when I was 19 years old for 1.5 day, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember you. We caught the tarpon here on this point, this tide, wind direction. The fish did this, this, and this. We got 4 jumps out of him, and then we got him to the boat.
You remember the important things.
Yeah, that's what I'm passionate about.
With the interview with Steve Huff, and I fished with him just recently, but in the interview he was talking about I would be in a certain spot, and I'm thinking with this wind, what is that wind doing to that water up on this bank 20 miles from here?
Yep.
And like Richard Black, we just spoke with him, and he's talking about the big picture that he has in his head, where he knows Miami to the Marquesas, and he'll run from the middle of Florida Bay down to Marathon to catch a permit, then he'll run over to the Snipe Keys to catch something. He was talking about like that.
Yep.
Do you run that far?
Yeah, absolutely.
And are you thinking that far in advance about a tide where you need to be in, say, maybe 2 hours?
Absolutely. So that never really started for me until I started fishing tournaments. I used to go to the same, which, I have a few spots that are just my money makers still to this day. Like if I'm not fishing for a year and go there and tell you exactly the fish. Because I would go to the same, like I said, I used to do half days. And so I had to have my spots dialed. We had, at the time I had a boat that did 27 miles an hour. So, half an hour drive there, half an hour drive back. So our fishing time's cut in half. So I used to fish the same spots every day. And I learned those fish that live on those areas don't leave. A lot of times, like especially bonefish, they live in a 1 mile area. Permit are very territorial. So I would go to a spot every day. Didn't matter time of day. I didn't even look at tides. I just went there and I'd get there and I'd say, I'm going to figure this out. I'd push around until I see what I thought looked like you said. I'd be watching, okay, well, the tide's too low for them to be up here. There's a contour line over there, though, that they might try to tuck up behind to get out of the current to relax or something like that. And then when it came time to start fishing tournaments and everything's under a time crunch and you need to get those few spots where before it didn't matter. I had people who just, a bonefish was the same thing to them as a snapper, a barracuda. They didn't care. So I would just go to the same spots where I knew I could catch a bonefish or whatever. But then when it became species specific targeting, that's when I started really dialing into the tides and everything like that, because you have to strategize like, okay, this is the one spot I know that has tarpon right now, and I need to be there at 10 o'clock because it's a 0.5 incoming. So then from there, I'm like, okay, well, where can I be that I can get there within 15 minutes? Okay, I know that this spot, and that's kind of how I started figuring that out. And having a big motor now, having the boat that does 55 miles an hour really helps with that.
Right.
But yeah, there's days that, you can run 120 miles total, no problem.
Did tournament fishing make you a better fisherman?
Hands down, without a doubt, completely changed every aspect of my life. Because fishing was always just taking people out, tourists,
right,
and showing them a good time. And I'll never forget, like when weather was bad, I kind of grew up with the mentality like, fishing sucks. It just is what it is. Can't do anything about it. And
now you got to catch a fish.
Now you got to catch a fish. But I also just realized that people are doing this on a different level than just going out and having fun, which I love to do. And I still try to do that every day, even on tournaments, but like people train for it, and I remember my first March Merkin, a client called me, and that he was Jay Decker was the Patagonia fly shop rep at Saltwater Angler. I think I was like 19 or 20 or something like that, or 20. I was young. And he was like, hey, I want to do this tournament. I'm like, dude, I'm not ready. Like, there's no way. And he's like, well, good. I'm not a good caster, so this will be perfect. We'll go figure it out together. And anyways, we had no idea what we were doing. And the weather was horrific. like I think it was like 65 degrees, blowing 25 to 30, all this stuff. And Nathaniel won the tournament. They had one shot in 3 days in clouds and saw a mud puff, and he caught that fish. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't think that was possible, like off of one shot, you know. And then the next tournament was the Scott Collins one, where they won down in the Marquesas on the last day, blowing like hell and everything like that. And so I started kind of paying attention, you know, and I saw guys like John O'Hearn, when I'd go to come in at the end of the day, you know, I never pushed upwind. I always pulled downwind, no matter what, and just try to get a better light angle that way if I could, sideways, whatever it was. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing 4:30 in the afternoon, John's pulling straight into the wind for miles. I'm like, okay, that's what needs to be done. And then I started talking to Nathaniel, you know, and seeing how dialed he was on everything. I remember like one time I went to the shop and he was tying different leader materials with the mason with a scale to find out the truest breaking strength. And I was an athlete my whole life, and I trained for things. And I knew that if you want to be better at something, the only way to get better is practice, and to practice that way for the game. And so that was just eye-opening for me. Like, okay, like these guys that are competing in these tournaments aren't just guys that are going out and getting lucky and having fun. These guys are professionals. Like, they're dedicating their lives to getting better at this sport, and they're taking it to a different level. And that just fascinated with me. I fell in love with it because my work ethic, that just gave me something to shoot for. And it just seemed like something that was just so unconquerable and so far in the future that I never thought that I would win my first tournament until I was in my 40s, when I first started really fishing tournaments.
And you've won 2 or 3 permit tournaments?
I've won 3 major permit tournaments.
3. And you're in the Don Hawley Tarpon Fly tournament
Yep,
this year.
This year is my first one.
What do you think about that?
I'm really nervous.
Well, here's an interesting thing with the Hawley. It's a 12-pound test release tournament.
Right.
I fished that with Doug Kilpatrick, and we were fishing Pearl Basin. And I'm thinking, we're running by a gazillion tarpon, and we're fishing for weight fish, and it's a release tournament. I said, Doug, you and I need to fish the Golden Fly, which is a weight fish tournament. I need to fish near Isla Morada, you know, for these smaller fish in the numbers game. So I switched tournaments. So I started fishing the Golden Fly with Doug, and I fished the Hawley with Paul Tejera, because that's his country.
Right.
Being a Lower Keys guide, where do you think you're going to fish? Are you going to run down here, or you're trying to learn the new tarpon waters up in Isla Morada area?
I've been fishing up in Isla Morada a lot this year.
Okay.
I've also been fishing down here just because I know this so well. It's what I've known my whole life. You know, I'm really just kind of honestly, one of the main reasons I've never fished the tarpon tournaments is it was just too intimidating for me. I'm a confrontational person, but not with people that I respect and look up to. And the tarpon tournaments, at least in the Key West crowd, we've always heard about the egos and the confrontations and stuff like that. And so I've just never wanted to be a part of that. I've always wanted to do it, but I love tarpon fishing, but I never wanted to get in anybody's way or make somebody upset, you know, especially these guys I've idolized my whole life. So I've had a bunch of people ask me to do the Gold Cup, the Golden Fly, and I never really wanted to do it because I was just scared that I would piss somebody off. I didn't want to hurt my reputation with those guys up there because I look up to them so much. And this opportunity just seemed right. I'm fishing Wesley Locke, Tommy Locke's daughter.
Very cool.
And she is just the biggest sweetheart in the world, you know, and, you know, she understands, you know, that like this year we're probably not going to place. You know, she's still getting
You can't
into
have that mentality.
Well, the thing is,
Brandon.
no, I mean, well, dude, every day is tournament day.
Yeah,
We're going to be trying
yeah.
everything we have, but at the same time, like, this is the Olympics, you know, of tarpon fishing. Just like those permit tournaments are the Olympics of permit fishing. Mm-hmm. I went into those permit tournaments for years knowing that, okay, like, I'm not going to win this. Like, I'm going against guys like Nathaniel who get to fish 120 days a year with the same guide.
Yeah, but
They're
I bet you those tournament wins, you did not go into that tournament thinking, okay, we're not going to place this year. You were thinking,
No.
I'm going to win.
I mean, I never thought I was going to win, but I thought I was going to
Nikki, the first year I started fishing tournaments, I was really intimidated.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure, I was too, but
did you think you were going to win?
Yeah, but no, I did
Well,
not.
there you go. There's no confidence thinking that, okay, I'm going to win. We got this. But you start walking, you start building that house one nail at a time. And then pretty soon the numbers start showing that on those tournament days, you're let's just say you're practicing to be in that tournament. So you compare how many fish you're catching to the guys that win tournaments. And then once you start matching days that they're having, you go, okay, I got a chance.
Exactly. I would agree with that 100%.
But what you're doing is very similar to like Ian Slater with Nathaniel. Ian's got to learn a lot of new country up there. Mm-hmm. So do you ever converse with Ian talking about tapping into that new zip code?
Yes and no. So we talk about it. We literally just this year kind of started talking about it back and forth together. But we're fishing guides. So like literally like I got, last time, me and Ian talked, he'll be like, hey, did you fish up the road today?
Right.
And I'll be like, yeah. He's like, oh, how was it? I was like, oh, the fish were moving on the south side and vice versa. So like that could mean Big Pine to Key Largo,
up the road.
Who knows?
Absolutely.
It's just up the road. Because honestly, one of the best things about being a guide in these tournaments is learning it yourself and earning it. Because if you do win, I won. I don't feel like Ian won because he told me where to go or what spot or anything like that. But also just like the way like you're talking about earlier with when you get to a flat. When I get to a flat, I'm going to analyze it and say, okay, like that's where that string's going to come from. I might hit them there, And me and Ian actually had a conversation yesterday about a spot down off of Key West that, he called me and was like, hey, like I saw you doing this. Like, I don't think that spot should be fished that way. You should be right here. It's kind of like one of his main spots. And it was just curious to me because like where he was talking about them coming across the Tarpon, they're moving really fast. And so like, I don't think that was like those fish just aren't really catchable. I mean, you get shots at them.
They're traveling.
They're traveling. Where after I've been fishing it, for a little bit now, I noticed that 20 feet on the other side of that point you're talking about, they stop and they slow down. And there's a brief moment in time where they pause. So
did you tell Ian that?
Yeah, I did, but at the same time,
I was going to say, okay, I'll fish it your way.
Well, no, I'm still because in my mind because I'm going to fish it his way, and that's what I want to talk to him about more and see if we can figure out how to work it together. Because it's a 2-boat spot, but he's the veteran at that spot. Even though I've been guiding longer than he has, I know that's where he goes, and that's just common respect, And that's how like a lot of these spots are. Like we're in a day and age now where there's not many secrets. Right. There's hardly any spots that I can truly say that nobody else goes to.
Right.
And that's the beauty of, what happens organically becoming a guide. If you're doing it right and you're learning your right on your own, let's just say I'm going for a permit. I go onto a spot and I find these fish following a specific line or a contour edge on a 0.5 outgoing. That's now my moneymaker. Ian might come there on a 0.7 incoming on a completely different line. And I have no idea that those fish are there on that line. And he has no idea that my fish are there on that line.
So it's 2 different spots actually, because the tides are different.
Exactly. And so like that's like the beauty of finding stuff out on your own, right? So let's say a tarpon tournament comes one day where me and Ian are competing against each other. And I want to run to a spot because he was like, yeah, I've been fishing up here with Nathaniel for the last couple of years off of Isla Morada, whatever. And, this is where they're coming through on this tide. Well, now we both race there. And if I beat him there, I'm going to feel horrific. That's his line, his spot. So, but if I naturally find that on my own, maybe I find it on a different tide.
It's yours.
Right. Well, or even if I find it on a different tide, and we're no longer going to conflict. He might leave that spot and I'm coming in after he's already gone. Mm-hmm. So like there's certain ways to talk about things with other people and other guides to allow it to mesh. That you're not interfering with each other. And that's like the problem with like so many new guides is drive around and see where people are and write down what tide they're there and see the line they're doing and watch them. So now you have 2 people that are bumping heads.
Sure. Yeah, that's what Dustin and Steve told you, right? Dustin was talking about a permanent spot or something. He's like, oh, I like that on a low rise, and Steve said,
Dustin
oh,
Huff
that's funny. I like that on a high fall.
Right.
And it was the same spot, but different tides.
Mm-hmm. And it's really funny because you see a boat out there and somebody might say, well, that guy has no idea what he's doing. That's the wrong tide.
Yep. My best bonefish spot off of Key West, in the Key West area, I should say, but I've seen maybe 2 other boats ever in my lifetime push it. And like, there's one guy that still goes in there occasionally, and I won't go there now if boats are around. But like, I just literally I got a really good piece of advice from another guide when I was younger. And he told me that every day you go out, fish a new spot, whether it's the same spot on a different tide or whatever, spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes. If you're going to be late getting in, and I always tell my clients, like, I tell them at the end of the day, if we haven't had a good day, I'm like, hey, I'm going to try something new. I hope you guys don't mind being late in. We might not see another fish, but I've found so many good spots doing that in the middle of nowhere, especially as human pressure is getting so concentrated. I mean, there's just in the last 5 years, there's 5 times as many guides as there was 5 years ago down here. So those fish that used to be traveling in an area and stuff like that, they've pushed out of there. And to a spot that used to be a dead zone my entire life now has the fish. So
yeah, that's good advice for new up and coming guides.
Yeah.
Spend 30 minutes to an hour pulling a new flat.
Right. Because either way you're learning.
Sure.
You're either learning where not to go or you're learning where to go.
Right. So when are you fishing the Gold Cup?
I don't know.
How did you come to this the decision to fish with Wesley?
Well, I had been down to Mag Bay in December of this year, and Wesley was there. We were doing a Costa Marlin fly project, and she was one of the other Costa pros that was there, and we got to hang out, and she just has the right mentality. She's a very tournament-driven, but just work ethic. Like, that girl is just dialed, and we have a lot to work on together, but she has the mentality that she wants to learn. So many people have so many egos. Being a guide, I can't tell you, people come down here like, oh, well, I tarpon fished in Cuba for 15 years with straight 80 pound, and this is how I caught them. I'm like, well, this isn't Cuba. Like, this is different, and so people need to be able to adapt and evolve. And so far, she's been very willing to like learn, and she has the drive to learn.
I'm really proud of these women that want to fish against the men, and to have Kat win that permit tournament this year. I mean, that with Doug Kilpatrick,
dude, unbelievable.
And you've got 2 world records with Kat. Talk to us about her a little bit.
Kat is an absolutely exceptional human being all around. And her and Nathaniel are just the perfect fit for each other because of their mindset.
Right.
They both want it so bad. And, what makes Kat special is that she wants it and she knows what it takes. She's at the park practicing 3-4 days a week, every week, and that's what it takes to be better. And, somebody like that who is willing and understands that they need to improve, and like when you try to work on her cast or whatever, she's listening. Or, there's no ego involved. That girl does not have a tiny amount of ego.
Yeah, that's what I know.
I mean, she is so humble, so sweet. And
she's all shucks kind of a girl, but when you start talking about permit fishing, she's really like zoned in and spot on in her work ethics, and it's all about winning. It's all about catching that fish.
Yep.
And she's refined her craft that she doesn't care about catching world records for.
Well, she doesn't care about tarpon fishing either.
She doesn't care about tarpon fishing. She is that permit refined addict.
Yep. I actually wanted to fish her in the tarpon tournaments. When me and her started doing the world record stuff, I talked to her about it, and I was like, man, I would love to fish you in the tarpon tournaments. And she just told me she had no interest, and I asked her, I was like, do you just not like tarpon? Like, why? Like, because you're such a competition driven person that she wants to succeed and make herself better. It's like, you'd be perfect for this. And, because as Kat is super strong. She works out a lot, and like so many times with all of fly fishing, it's about technique. And she's one of those people that is so aware of the most minute details of fighting fish, casting, where her fly line's at, everything, leaders, it's all dialed. And she just told me, she was like, look, like I maybe one day, but right now, if I start focusing on that, that's going to take away my attention from this.
Right.
Right now, her priority is to win those tournaments. And which I respect so much, that she would, instead of watering herself down to maybe try to do both, she is just focused. That is her goal. She is tunnel visioned on it. And
that's the same with Nate. He
Yeah,
doesn't want to
absolutely.
permit fish now or fish permit tournaments. He wants to really win a tarpon tournament, especially the Gold Cup.
Yeah, I mean, they've been so close so many times now.
They essentially won it. And
boat motor broke. And
well, they caught a small weight.
No.
Which they thought it was a small weight. They took it as a weight. It was undersized. It was under 70 pounds. And so they got no points for that fish. But had they released it, let it go as a release, the release points would have been 300. And those points would have given them the win.
Yep.
So they lost it by taking an undersized fish.
And it was just like barely undersized. Right? It was like 65 pounds.
Yeah,
maybe
it's
70.
So frustrating.
I mean, how can you tell?
And I don't think it was the 5th day. I think it was like day 3. He was saying, but
it didn't matter. How did you feel when you won your first permit tournament?
Honestly, I remember just being in disbelief, shaking, and it was just one of the happiest days of my life. That was permit were just my obsession. And I don't know.
That's your favorite fish, permit?
So it's hard to say that,
right?
Because I'll explain in a second, but the feeling was just so surreal. I almost couldn't celebrate for 2 or 3 days because here I am. I'm the dog on the treadmill chasing the carrot on the stick in front of me. I never thought I was good enough to reach it. And still to this day, like I feel like sometimes I just get lucky, and I didn't know what to do. I actually got it and I was like, now what? Like what? Like is this? I was waiting for something else to happen to like tell me that it wasn't real. And I mean, it just gave me a lot of, encouragement that I was approaching things the right way. Because the years before that, I used to fish with a guy who didn't even know how to double haul. I fished 6 tournaments with him. Didn't even know how to double haul. Wouldn't practice. He would show up, like literally we would have one day of pre-fishing before the permit tournament. And he'd text me the night before or the morning. I'd be like, hey, I'm just going to hang out with the wife by the pool today. I'm not going to fish. And I'm just like, okay. So I'd go out solo and scout. And then at the end of the tournament, we would have so many shots. And I'd talk to some other people and they'd be like, yeah, we only saw like 8 to 10 fish the whole tournament. Now, whether or not that's just tournament talk and people trying to keep stuff in the down low, but I was like, man, like saw a lot of fish today. Like we had a lot of really good shots, but like not one fly got in front of the fish. Like me and him didn't hook a single permit in 6 tournaments together. And, so I don't know. I just never really thought I was good enough. And then me and him kind of had a falling out. And I got to fish somebody else who was a little bit better. And our first tournament we won together. We literally decided 2 weeks before the tournament. They had an open spot and we got it. We decided to fish it and we took 3rd place and largest. And I was like,
you're in the game.
Okay. Like, and then honestly at that time, I just thought that maybe the fishing was bad everywhere else. And I just got lucky. And then the next one was post-COVID. It was the IGFA Invitational right after COVID. And I fished every day during COVID, every day. And we were catching a lot of permit, and when Nathaniel called me and we were talking about it, he's like, would you want to fish this? Like, would you think that would be, like, I want to set up a permit tournament in October. Would you be into it? And I was like, dude, I would love to. He's like, well, who do you want to fish? I was like, well, like, how would you feel about me fishing a guide? At the time, my buddy Nick LaBady, who's a guide down here, me and him were fishing together every day during off COVID. And we got really good as a team. And we were catching permit pretty much every time, at least one every time we went out. And Nat's like, 'cause, a lot of people don't like guides in tournaments. Like that had always been a big controversy with Justin Ray and Jose and Will Benson and Sandfleet. Mm-hmm. And Nat was like, dude, he's like, an entry fee is an entry fee. Like if I win this tournament, I want to say that I felt good fishing against the best. I don't want to say, oh, well, I had this, this was limited that people couldn't get in or, like because they're a guide and they're a better angler, like whatever it was. And so that just was like, whoa, okay, that's a really cool way to look at it. Like this is going to be like a tournament that's just whoever can get, good anglers. And me and Nick pulled out a win. Weather was horrible. It was one of those ones that was blowing 30, 35. remember my hands were bleeding at the end of the tournament from pulling. I literally pulled the skin off my fingers.
Wow.
Did that again in this year in the March Merkin, like, yeah. And but I remember like we came back and we just couldn't believe it because there's just so many of those tournaments, especially permit. You just never know, right? Somebody is just as likely to come in. Those good guys are just as likely to come in with 1 fish or 5. And I remember like looking at the clock, just being sick to my stomach, just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
I know, that's so awful, isn't it?
Oh, it was so terrible. And like, of course, like, you know, I like raced in full throttle after, you know, to make sure, because my biggest fear was that like we would break down on the way in or something like that and couldn't enter our final
late.
fish. Yeah, come in late. And I got in with like 45 minutes till the last one. So we had to sit there pacing back and forth. I remember Nick getting me a tequila drink, was like, dude, just relax. Either way, like we had a blast, like just enjoy it. And somehow we pulled off the win. And that was just, to me, was just like, okay, that was the first time that I actually felt like I was good enough, because me and him had practiced for all of COVID. You know, I felt like we were dialed, because like that was, I was like, okay, like Nat always told me when you can catch 1 permit a day average, you have a chance of winning.
Right.
And we were doing that.
What was a greater success, winning those 3 tournaments? And it's hard to say because comparing apples to oranges, because you cut, you know, 2 world records with Kat.
Which one was greater to me?
Yeah, I mean, how do you weigh those out? They're completely different, of course.
You know,
you like record fishing?
I love record fishing. Just because of how hard it is and how dialed in you have to be in specific, you know, targeting fish, you know, and then not every fish counts, you know.
You gotta find the right size.
You gotta find the right size. You gotta get them to eat. You gotta do it in the right spot. Unlike typic, if it's a spot that has too much current and that line starts dragging through the water, it's gonna break off. You gotta have an angler that, like Kat, that's willing to know and feel. I mean, our reels are measured out the exact amount of pounds of drag, so we know. And the teamwork, I need to know where to put the boat and everything like that. I would say they're the same. You know, I love those world records. You know, one of the things that just makes the record so special for me is that they were with Kat.
Right.
You know, and she's one of those people that when you see her do well, you feel just the best. Like, I mean, all these tournaments, right? Somebody's always upset they didn't win. Somebody's upset that, I know every tournament that I've won, I've had a couple of the older guys that are just grumpy and pissed, like, oh, he must have done this or he must have done that. Somebody always has something to say. When we got back at the March Merkin, I was one of the last boats back, and somebody on the dock came running out and was like, Kat won. I literally ran up as fast as I could, jumped up, picked her up, let her started crying. And you look around the room, every single person in that room looked like they had just won the tournament, because she has earned every single bit of that win. Nobody works harder. Nobody practiced harder. And it was incredible. You know, to see somebody that dedicated and that passionate about something accomplish their dream, it's the best feeling in the world. I mean, I know all I could think about was how I felt when I won my first tournament, or like, you know, I did that because I win, you know, Mike Ward's my other tournament partner now. And that was, I think, one of the most monumental ones for me, was that a lot of people said, oh, well, he won that tournament because he was fishing with a guide on the first one. And then the Dell last year, when me and Mike won, that was kind of like, okay. Like, and Mike had fished permit tournaments for 10 years and never won one. And then we did 2 back to back. So big. That was kind of like, okay, like something's going on here now, you know. And like, I think the biggest thing is that there is no guide that is perfect. I have tons of flaws. I'm not this almighty. I don't consider myself a legend, but I'm adaptive and I work with my clients, and I had to adapt to Mike and stuff that he did, and he had to adapt to me. Mm-hmm. And that's what's awesome about this, you know.
What's next on your rocket ship, which you're on?
Well, the Tarpon tournaments.
The Tarpon. Well, one of my biggest dreams is to win the March Merkin. Mainly because that tournament to me is one of the hardest, because the weather is always really bad. And that's the one that made me fall in love with permit fishing and change my career to where I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this everything I have. Because like I said before, I loved fishing. It was fun. but I did a lot of spin trips. It was just about catching people fish, making the client happy and everything like that. That was the tournament that changed my career after watching Nathaniel and those guys, that my guiding was no longer, we're going out to have this to do fun. My guiding now became, I'm going to take you out and I'm going to show you how to catch these fish, and we're going to work together to teach you how to become better. So that every time you come down here, I don't care if you're like, oh yeah, we caught 30 tarpon out of a channel last year. I'd much rather you be like, yeah, we caught 4 tarpon stringing over white sand, and I learned how to split the schools or split a string, and I learned how to that. And that's what made me change. You know, when I started fishing classes and stuff like that, where it's no longer just about catching fish and just doing this. It's like, okay, like I want you to be better. You're just as passionate about this as I am. I'm going to help you improve, because then it gets you better and better, and you love it more and more, and you just feel such a sense of accomplishment.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you want to win the tarpon tournaments?
Oh, of course.
Are you, I mean,
what kind of fucking question?
Well, I'm going to ask. Wait, because I'm going to follow this up. Are you going to put the same effort into tarpon tournaments that you have in the permit tournaments?
Absolutely. Down the road, you know, I'm easing my way into it right now, but I realize what it takes to win those tarpon tournaments.
So you'll back off the permit a little bit to give more effort to the tarpon?
I don't think so, just because the way that our tarpon season down here works, you know, even though I know Isla Morada and up there has a great tarpon fishing in wintertime, I've dipped into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. What those fish are doing during the tarpon season, you know, the tournament season, is completely different than then. And it just so happens that all the permit are offshore spawning right now. And honestly, I just want to leave them alone. I want them to do their thing anyway.
Yeah, they don't really overlap.
Right, they don't really overlap. So basically, my plan is going to be after March, which this is the first year I do. Because I normally bonefish, you know, still go look for permit. After the Merkin this year, I was just full throttle tarpon, all thing. And,
are you looking for an angler for the Gold Cup and the other tournaments as well?
Probably, you know, but I want to see how this goes first.
Right.
You know, and I want to see, because like the thing is that I want to be able to enjoy it. And if it's going to be a miserable experience and everybody's at each other's throats and stuff like that, at the same time, like one of the things that I look forward to tarpon season every year is that I get to fish clients that I've been fishing since I was 18 years old. They've become best friends. I know their kids' names. I know their wives, their dogs. I know everything about them. And the only way that I'd be able to fish those tournaments is now, because like I have basically April through second week of July. I have my clients that have the set days every
year. So no
year.
new people can get on your boat.
They can, you know,
but it's got to be January 5th.
Yeah, it's got to start like that, and then it shifts around, right?
Sure.
Like people can't do their days or whatever, and so I would have to now call these people who I consider friends, and even though they're not, dude, a lot of my tarpon guys aren't very good anglers. They're terrible, but they're some of the best human beings on the planet, and they fill my soul with life.
Sure.
You'd have to rebook them.
Yeah, I'd have to be like, tell them like, hey, like I'm not going to fish you anymore because you're not good enough or whatever. And I don't have that in me like that. And that's probably been the biggest holding factor back, because in order to do that tournament, like that's me and Wesley's biggest downfall this year. We fished together 2 days this year. That's it. That's our only practice we've had. And we're going to have 2 days right before the Holly. And I realized that if you want to succeed at this, at the level that these guys are competing at, we're not just going out and catching tarpon. You know, you're going out, and whether you're running from Isla Morada to Key West or Isla Morada to Biscayne or, you know, the west side of the Everglades, whatever it is, like you have to be dialed in together. Like that.
It's a team.
It's a team effort. And so I would need to find somebody that's willing to put in that amount of time and money into that same effort as I am. And it's going to be a really tough transition. Because my biggest thing is letting people down.
But also, too, you got to chase your passion. If that's your passion, you got to go full throttle into it.
Exactly. And that's why this year is a perfect year for me to dip into it. Like me and Wesley, I just want to get on the board. If I could put a fish on a day, I'll be super happy. And
it'd be a good start.
I want to leave that tournament without, somebody's going to be mad. I've just accepted that. That's okay, because can't please everybody. But I would like to leave with everybody being like, okay, you know what? Brandon didn't get in our way this year. Like most people don't even know that I've been fishing up there. You know, until this podcast comes out, everybody thinks that I am Key West or West.
West or Key West.
Yeah, they have no, you know, I live in Big Pine. I fish everywhere.
Yeah. I think you're going to have a great time.
Yeah.
I think so, man. You know, and I will say that growing up in Key West with those people having that, when I started going and fun fishing, like some of these goofball tournaments, you know, and just goofing around with Benny and stuff like that, and meeting like Jared Raskob, Mike Alfano, Luis Cortez, Rob, they have been nothing but so kind and just open from the beginning. Like my first time up there, I was super nervous and at the thing, and Jared came up to me and was like, "Hey, what are you doing after this? Why don't you come over to our house, have a couple drinks with us, we relax, we're gonna have we're playing darts." And I didn't know the guy. I'd never met him before. And that was just so cool to me that he was just so open and relaxed.
He's incredible.
Jared's the king of fun.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
What would you like to add to this podcast that we've missed?
Trying to think. I'm just one of those people that I will literally talk all day long.
What would you suggest, the one tip to someone who's coming to the Keys for the first time to catch a saltwater fish? What tip would you give them to better their chances?
First of all, the first thing that I would like to say is just that, to respect the history of the fishery. Main reason I'm bringing this up right now is tarpon, right? There's this huge debate right now of the mortality of the fish, of fishing, straight 60 to 40 pound for tarpon and thin wire hooks or bigger hooks that you can land them faster, and that is healthier for the fish than fishing class. I look at tarpon fishing right now as the history and a legacy, and those are the rules that are set using, I've only been fishing 12 pound this year, and every single client, when I tell them we're fishing 12 pound, they break a fish or two off right away and they're bummed about it, whatever, this is stupid. And then they get through the hook set and we start cranking the drag down. Arms are shaking, and I'm like, could you physically pull harder right now? And they're like, no. I'm like,
and you're on 12 pound test.
The difference is now I've taken you from a client that could get away with anything, poking a fish. Now you have to be aware of what you're doing and how hard you're pulling. You've improved as an angler. And I think that that's just the right way to do it. I think those are the rules that were set in place. The thing that I would be is that would be like if a basketball player, somebody want to start playing basketball and they're saying, I'm new to it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a hoop that is 6 foot in diameter.
And we'll lower it.
And then they start making threes all day. And they're like, I'm a good basketball player. No, you're not. You didn't follow the rules that were set. You were going and so you changed the game for yourself so you could be better.
Do you fish IGFA legal leaders?
I do, every day. Yep. That's all I fish. I think it's important to the legacy of the sport. And, most people don't realize how hard you can pull, and you can teach the angler to pull that way. I fished Meredith McCord this whole week, 5 days straight. And we landed 16 fish in 5 days. Not one fish went over 7 minutes to the boat, and we had fish up to 120 pounds, anywhere from 50 and that. And so if you have people that know what they're doing, the guy knows how to position the boat and do everything right, you land them quick. And I mean,
is that taking the fly out of the fish or just getting the leader?
I mean, some of them, about half.
Because I was going to say 120 pound fish in 7 minutes.
The 120, it was like one of those things, the water was like 92 degrees, drove up to it. We pulled it, got it up, got the leader, and, we had the leader a couple times. And instead of stressing the fish out, just break it off.
Yeah.
And so that's just that's a whole nother debate, when to fight fish, when to, do that. But, and you wouldn't believe, because they don't have enough time to build up lactic acid that quickly. And,
right. They don't get stressed.
Right. And minimize handling time.
Right.
If you do want a photo of that tarpon side, I think out of all the fish this week, we might have taken 3 pictures boat side. I'm getting the cameras and everything laid out before I even attempt to grab the fish. So that if I grab it, go, snap, 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 keep it under 60 seconds, fish takes off. I mean, I get kicked in the face a lot. I have a busted bottom lip from one this week,
Sure.
So, I would say, just be passionate about this sport, respect it, and just give it your all.
Perfect.
It's well said. Well, I wish you nothing but the best in the holiday with Wesley. I love her. And you guys are going to be a great team.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
Great having you.
Thanks so much for coming on,
I
man.
really appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, bud.
When I saw it's West Side Story, when I saw it's just alright.